So we got a question.
Yes, I'm Buzz Kutcher, K3GWK. The node adapters, the PC that a node adapter uses, will it have to be a Linux computer, or can it be a Windows computer? Are node adapters generally require a Linux computer also?
So the node adapters, we're going to have a full section on that a little bit later. They will run on PCs. They'll run on just about anything. Macs, PCs, Linux, entire board. Any other questions? So I'm going to talk on a couple of different subjects as we move through here. First one, DR mode. Use it. It stands for digital repeater mode. It was developed a couple iterations of radio ago by Icom. It first started coming out in ID-800. They got it close to ID-800, but at the ID-31 and then the 5100s and most of the radios at that point in time, they really made DR mode work. So John touched on a little bit about the your call, my call, those type things, RPT1, RPT2. When you're using DR mode, it's so much easier. You really just specify your local repeater and what you want to do on that local repeater. That makes it really easy. DR mode, the radios have a GPS built into them. So the GPS sees where you're at. You know, wouldn't it be nice if a radio was smart enough to know the repeaters around you? That's what DR mode does. There's a database of repeaters in the radio, and that database can tell you where the nearest repeater is. If you look at the display, it tells you the nearest repeater, the distance and direction that repeater is to you. So when you select it, it programs the radio for you. So the in the 51 series supports both digital and FM repeaters. So think of this for a radio, the ID-51. If you don't like D-Star, but you like FM, the ID-51 has a database of FM repeaters in it. You can update that list of repeaters wherever you go around the country. Now, I will admit that the radios only hold between about 700 and 1,500 repeaters. There are over 20,000 repeaters in the US, so it doesn't hold all of them at once. So basically with DR mode, you pick your source repeater. The list in the radio is a little out of date because it was put in there when the radios were made. You choose your nearest repeater, then you choose your destination, and voila, your radio is now programmed. You can do this with the radio out of the box from the manufacturer. Head to your dealer today, and you can get that done. I'll show you a little bit more instructions on how to use it in a little bit. So one of the things with DR mode, the default on the radio for the 2 is CQ, CQ, CQ. And that's generally exactly what we want, except that, no, it's not. What we want is to use the your call sign, your repeater, the reflector, use reflector. So they changed it a little bit between generations of radios, but generally most of the radios today, you want it to say reflector, use reflector. So on the screens, you can see here where it says use reflector. So up on the top screen, the ID-5100 there, it says use reflector, CQ, CQ, CQ. If it says just CQ, 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 it will not really work right. If it just says CQ, 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 what's happening is you're only being heard on your local repeater. So you hear people, you talk back. Every once in a while, somebody might respond to you. But that's only because that person is on the same repeater that you are. If you do not have it and use reflector, CQ, 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 you will not be heard where that repeater is linked to. So if you want to talk to the world, always make sure you've got use reflector, CQ, CQ, CQ. Talked about registration a little bit. So some setup and program on the radio. So here's a setup guide. This one is actually got the details for the 3151, but it really is the same for the 5100s and most of the other modern radios are out there from Icom. And trust me, it's actually a lot more to write down the individual steps to actually do this. So basically, you want to enable the internal GPS on the radio after you buy it. Now, on the 51Plus2 and Anniversary Edition, I believe the GPS is already turned on. There's a little icon up on top of the screen that shows it, whether it's blinking or not. And this is the place. You just program the call signs, you just go through these button presses, and this is button press by button press. As you read through this, you get your call sign on the radio, and you're just about there. So select the nearest repeater. On the Icom series, you press and hold the DR button, which is the lower button on the rocker panel, for about 2 seconds. You'll hear the radio go beep, and you'll see the screen now split into two pieces. Or if you've got it where you're watching two receivers up, it'll split into 3 different pieces. So it was already in, if it's in 1 piece already, it'll go to 2. If it's in 2, it'll go to 3. And so basically at that point in time, you'll see the to and the from. And the to and the from, basically what we're going to do first is set the from repeater. So we're going to go to the from, which use the up and down arrows on the rocker switch. Click the blue button in the middle. When you get to the blue button, you're going to have the option of nearest repeater or select from the list. You'll want to select near repeater. And once you do near repeater, if it has a GPS signal, it's going to come back with the list of repeaters. You look on the display, it shows the distance and directions for each one to you. Select it. Now, you're tuned to that frequency. You're on the air. This works for D-Star as well as FM. When you do it for FM, it sets everything for you. The tones, the frequencies, the offsets, everything for you. And on D-Star, it sets all the RPT1s, RPT2s, all that types and frequencies, all that for you. So all of that is built into the radio. All you got to do is go through it and click it on. And then the 2, you're going to hit the up arrow to go to the top, hit the blue button again, and you can go to repeater, use repeaters. You go through that. This is the instructions for the 31, I think, which had the old way in it. But basically go repeater, use repeater, click that, and then you come back, you'll see your repeater listed in the bottom, in the from, and you'll see reflector, use CQ, CQ, use reflector, CQ, CQ, CQ in the top. That's all it takes. Any questions? Okay, question here in the front.
Norris, N9XGZ. I know you can update the digital side. Can you update or set it up to pull certain sections of the country like Midwest for the FM side?
So indeed, you can update the database on the radio both for D-Star and FM repeaters. We'll hit that in the slide or two as we come on down here. We're going to actually go through the process.
Ed, actually, I've seen a few people that have taken the SD card that they put in a radio and saved different areas because they've overloaded there's more repeaters than there are memories. So if they fly to a certain region of the country, they can then load up that database and use that as well.
Indeed, all the radios that support DR mode, I believe, support SD card. And on that SD card, you can load different profiles. The newer ones, you can load CSV files as well as ICF files. On the original 3151, you can only load the ICF files, but in either case, you can load the files directly to it. And then, indeed, just when you go to different areas, load it in. On D-Star repeaters, generally, you can actually set it up where you get most of the country for D-Star repeaters. For FM repeaters, yeah, they don't all fit. So as you move through, you may want to move between states, those type of things. You may have different loads for FM repeaters that you put on the radio. For Kenwood, wow, we've got another manufacturer in here with us now. So Kenwood's making their radio, the TH-D74. I don't have the pretty pictures on this screen, but it is pretty much just easier. First time setup, you need to set your call sign. That's on menu 610. You hit the menu 610 buttons. That tells you how to get there. Hit the enter button and set your call sign. So same thing as with the Icom radios. You got to put that call sign in there. Also got to make sure the GPS is on, but it is on by default on the radio. So we're in pretty good shape there. Choose the repeater. You've got to be in the VFO mode, not the memory mode. And it takes me a little while to get used to this radio because I've been used to the Icom interface for a little while. You want to change the mode until you get into the DR mode. The display then for that band should switch to a dual line mode. Just like before, press and hold on the DR button on the 51 series, we'll get the same dual line display on the Kenwood. We're going to press and hold the up arrow for a second, and we'll hear a beep, and we'll be on the destination select menu. There, we'll do the same thing. Choose reflector, select reflector, use reflector. Then we'll come back to the main screen. Then we'll hit press and hold the down button for a second. Radio beep, and then we'll choose the nearby repeaters. The Kenwood does not support FM repeaters, nearest FM repeaters. It only supports the nearest D-Star repeaters at this time. So in either case, you buy the radio, get it today, walk outside, put the battery in it, put the antenna on it, put your call sign in it, select the nearest repeater, put it in DR mode, select the nearest repeater, select the two to be reflector, CQ, use reflector, CQ, 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 and you're on the air talking, ready to talk. Question? Hang on a second so that folks on the web.
Dave, W4DTR. So is this information on D-Star Info or is it on the other website?
So this page for the Kenwood is actually on the forum. I need to put it online on D-Star Info, so I'll hopefully get it up there. Find the one for the Icoms is up on the site. So we'll try to get this one up here soon. I keep forgetting to do that part. So updating the radio. You can update it using the Icom or Kenwood software. You can update it using information from dstarinfo.com. I can give you the downloads for either the Icom or the Kenwood software, and you can also write that information to SD card for the newer radios directly. Just put it on the SD card. Also, our great friends at RT Systems, they have some really great programming software for both of the radios. So if you haven't seen their program, go take a look at it. Generally, when we're programming the Icom radios, we all use what's called the orange cable. The orange cable, a little bit better price than the Icom cable. And it works. It works great. That's the really nice thing about that cable. You can get that cable, you can buy it by itself, and you can buy it with their software. Both of them are relatively inexpensive in the whole scheme of things. And the RT System software allows you to move a lot of information back and forth between radios.
Does using the orange cable void your warranty?
Absolutely not. And you can build your own cable if you want to. We have a question?
Larry, WX4LEC. Just a question on the orange cable. As I understand, the orange cable can only be used to update the radio. It cannot be used to connect the radio out to the D-Star or to your computer for the D-Star network. Is that correct?
So the orange cable is used for everything that you hook up to the serial port on the radio. Program the radio, DRATs, all those functionalities. Now, what other function would you be, let's bring the mic back. What other functionality would you be kind of referencing? Wait till we get the microphone so the folks on the web can hear us.
I had just heard it reported that the orange cable was only for used to for the programming and couldn't be used to connect the radio to your computer to work like DRATs.
No,
for instance.
it supports all of the data functions. So if you're running DRATs or anything else like that, plus programming, so it's kind of a general cable for just about all purposes. Probably, if you've got a D-Star radio, it's probably good to have an orange cable, the orange RT Systems cable. Great accessory for whatever you want to use.
So, question, yes.
Okay, Norris and 9XGZ. Another question. How do you program these so they will show up on APRS?
So the radios will show up on APRS. There's an add-in that occurs that's on the repeaters, and that add-in generally takes the information and relays it to the APRS internet network. You do have to turn on the GPS sending. Do either any of y'all remember the steps for that one?
There are several things in the menu that you're doing. Two things. Well, answer one of your questions on that a little more clearly. If you are within range of a D-Star repeater, and you have this set up to do that, when you key, it goes to the repeater and then goes out. It's routed to the APRS IS network, so then it will show up that way. One of the key things that you want, so you're not depending on going to a Digi somewhere or an APRS node to be able to send it. The second part of that is you don't want to be sending that information periodically. You want to have it set where you're only sending your position information when you key the radio. Otherwise, you're keying up a repeater every so often, whether it be 1 minute, 5 minute intervals, whatever. So you want to have it, we call that beaconing, and you don't want that feature because that's actually keying up the repeater when it does that. If you have it set where it's only for push to talk, that's the desirable way to do that.
But do you have to set that for NEMA or what? I've set mine both ways, and my local repeater does not pick me up. Reason I'm asking is I will be in Washington State later this year. The Forest Service monitors their equipment with APRS. We've got a couple hams that are out there. We're visiting somebody with the Forest Service, and they want to be able to track us when we go off hiking in case there's a problem.
Will you be within range of a D-Star repeater?
Yes.
Okay. In the menu functions, there's, if you go to menu, there's, I'm trying to find it, GPS. Then you want to set GPS TX mode. That will be off. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. That goes to DPRS. Back up in the menu to GPS Auto TX. And that's where you want to set that to off so it doesn't beacon. And then
And that's important to do. You don't want to be beaconing every minute or two, because if you had 30 people on a repeater all beaconing, you'd never be able to talk.
And there's one more place that I'm trying to remember where that is in the menu, that where you set it for only push to talk. I'm just trying to quickly look and see where that is. I think it may be under function.
Do you set it for NEMA or do you set it for the other setting?
If you set it for, well, once you're with the newer generation of radios like a 51A or a 5100, I don't think it makes any difference anymore.
It gives you the option.
It gives you the option, but in general, set it to DPRS. That's your first choice. I'm trying to remember, there's one more place in the menu. It's not coming to mind real quick. I don't remember exactly where it is, where you set that it's only for push to talk only. But those three functions ought to get you set and running. And one of the ways that you can check it, if you key up to a repeater and then go to the dashboard page for it, if you key up, let's say you're on W4DOC downtown Atlanta, you key your radio and your GPS is on a reporting position. If you go to the dashboard page, you'll see where you have keyed up, you'll see your call sign in the last heard. If it is orange and bold, it has received your position information. You can click on that, and it will bring up a Google map, I believe, that will show your position. That's a confirmation that you're sending the data. But you can do that with just about any repeater. Go to its dashboard page. He says he's within range of a D-Star repeater.
The comment was, does the Forest Service look at APRS via a digi-RF, or do they look at it on APRS.FI? Because you're not going to show up on an RF 144.39. Okay, you'll show up on FI.
And so here I'm actually looking at one of the reflector dashboards, and we can see in the last herd, we've got some animals that are in black, and then we've got the ones in orange. When we click on the orange one, we do indeed see where he's at. I cannot pronounce a single word on that screen.
So he's famous now.
One thing to remember on that is, and we might talk about this earlier, there's some Android apps that you can run with the with like an ID-51 or 5100 mobile. There's an Icom app for that for Android. That is the one place that the orange cable does not work. It takes a special cable to be able to use that to use the Icom
RTS05.
No, not the cable, but
Not
the
orange cable, the
Icom
black
app.
cable.
RS.
Got one over my case over here, I think, somewhere.
Yeah,
Try to pull up later.
yeah. It's a special cable for that, but it will. Back to the other question. That's the only thing you can run any of the data applications or programming with the orange cable.
I had one.
Question, yes.
The cable difference is the blue cable that is a I'm sorry, I'm looking for it here. 29A. That's a clone only cable.
No.
According
You don't. Let's don't confuse things with that one. The only place that I think that cable is really used if you have one of the 2820s, one of the earlier radios, then it requires that blue cable plugged into the speaker port.
Or you could actually run the orange in the front port, the blue in the back. So that's not a common cable used anymore except for the older radios. And the only difference is just the size of the plug. So I'm going to go through a programming here live. So basically, I've got a ID-51. I'm going to hook up the programming cable, the orange programming cable, to the data jack on the radio. And so I'm going to go to the Icom software. I hope that John's got the COM port set up right. First thing we always need to do when we're programming the radio is read from the radio. I'm not going to say what's already there. See if it reads. Yes, I'm looking at the radio, and the radio is indeed saying clone out, and we see that it's cloning in. So right now I'm taking all the information in the radio and bringing it into the computer. It's not really fast. Give us a couple seconds. Sure. So this radio, it's loading all the memories. While it's continuing to load, let's go ahead and download for it. So basically, we go to dstarinfo.com. We're going to look at the repeater list downloads for DR mode radios. And what we're going to do is come down, and first of all, we're going to put in our location. We can put in all sorts of things for locations. We can put in coordinates. We can put in names. We can put in all sorts of stuff. It basically does a pretty good search. Let's see if I can spell the town right. And we'll do a lookup location on that. And then come back, indeed, we need to click the second screen here, and we can see indeed found Lawrenceville, Georgia. Here's the latitude and longitude for it. If you ever want to find your Maidenhead grid, this is a pretty quick way of finding your grid. You can put a zip code in, you can put your address in here, and it'll come back with the Maidenhead grid for you. And then we'll come down here and we'll select the radio. So the import has, excuse me, the import has now finished. We'll come back, continue the download. So we get to choose between all these different radios. Honestly, quite often there's not that much difference between some of the radios, between the 51A, the anniversary, the +2, everything really downloads exactly the same. But there is a difference between the 51 and the 5100 because the 5100 has more memories. So when I look at a 51A, which is a radio, I've got an anniversary here, 51A anniversary, we see that there are 500 regular memories in that radio, 750 repeater list, 200 your call sign list, not commonly used that much, and the display length is 16 characters. Display length becomes kind of important because when you go back to some of the older radios, it's a much smaller, and so as we're putting the information that you see on the screen, it doesn't fit that well, so we have to make sure that downloads are appropriate for that. And when we look at the 5100, the latest version of it, we'll see that there's 1,000 standard memories and 1,500 repeater list memories in that radio. So we set up, get the right file. We'll go back over to the 51A anniversary. Also, when we look at the list, we'll notice that there is some with the A's and some with the E's. The E's are used for the European standards because on the import files, they don't use periods. They use commas to separate things. Also, the frequency ranges of those radios are different. So they don't accept all the frequencies that a US radio does support. So make sure you choose one, especially if you're in Europe, using the Europe software to program radio. Empty repeater slots. Every once in a while I get questions on this one, and John made me add this field. So on the repeater list, one of the things that we can actually do to that is we can go in and edit it, and we can add our hotspot information into it. So generally I leave a few of these empty, and I've got my hotspot information that I then go add back to it after I download it. And so I think I leave 10 empty because I've got 4 different hotspots programmed on radio and 2 different for each one of them. And then the %FM. The default is 20% FM, which basically gives you all the repeaters in the United States and a lot of FM repeaters around you, maybe stretching out to 50 to 100 miles. It's really dependent upon where you're at. Montana is definitely different than Atlanta with the number of repeaters that you get back, but it gives you that. So on the radios that support FM, you'll see this field. If you choose one of the radios that do not support it, then this field will not even show up. So the default that I chose many years ago was 20%. John has decided he likes 80%. With 80%, you get most all the FM repeaters in the state of Georgia, and the D-Star repeater probably 500,000 mile.
Well, within all your neighboring states.
So it's up to you. You can make the choice whichever way you want it. You can always look at the radio or the Excel file and
you mentioned that the empty repeater slots was for hotspots that also work with DVAPs?
Yes, DVAPs, hotspots, all of that. We can put it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and download it now. Save it. Desktop. See it. So we'll see the file name in there. I forget exactly what they are. It's Icom Radio American ID-51, I think is what that kind of stands for. And It changed a little bit in the latest release. This file name, this file should be able to be put on a CSV file. The CSV file should be able to be put on an SD card and loaded directly in the radio. So you actually don't have to have the Icom software or the Kenwood software. You can actually put it on the put it on the SD card and just load it directly on the radio. You do have to make sure you put it in the right spot on the SD card, though. That's one important part. So it has downloaded. We're going to go back over to the Icom software. Now, when we go to Icom software, we come in here and look up. These are the regular memories up here. This is what you're normally been used to programming on a radio, is these memories. You can use these memories. You can keep using them. Putting your simplexes in here. A lot of things may be things that you still want to do with these. But my radio generally only has the digital, the repeater list in it. So there's some in here indeed now, because I had some of my radios. But I'm going to go to the repeater list. You know, and you can't right click on this thing. So I go up to File, Import. Because I have selected the top level, it doesn't allow me to do a group. Actually, my hotspot information I stored in a group file all by itself, where I can import it just by itself, but we'll generally do all. We'll choose the file. All the information, repeater list information will be cleared. Are you sure? Yes, there's some details there. The use from settings and repeater list. Yes, we'll keep those. And we'll load it in. You will get this. Some settings have changed from the valid value, because it's kind of interesting that the values that you put into this software, it doesn't like certain things, but if you put it into the radio, it's happy with it. The two different pieces of software are a little bit different. Generally, just ignore it. So now when we come in here and look at this, we will indeed see that the USA Southeast has a yellow mark on it. That's absolutely fine. Because when they created this software, they went, repeaters can't have the call signs, same call signs in D-Star. But when they added FM to it, oh yeah, a lot of repeaters in FM do have the same call signs. That's what the warning is. You'll notice here the N4 NEQ repeater has got the infamous yellow on it. Don't have to worry about it. Just go ahead and load it. So generally here is all the FM repeaters in this group. And we'll go down here. That's the FM list, the way it puts in it now. Then we'll have the USA Southeast. I probably need to add FM and D-Star to the names of these things. But this is the D-Star repeaters now. When we look at this, we'll notice that all the information generally is already put in here. There's the frequency, the duplexes, the offset frequencies. Even for some of those D-Star repeaters that have really, really weird offsets, such as this 2.5 up here. All of this is put in here. And indeed, latitude and longitude is there. So that's how the radios know to find these things. So we've got this imported in. I'm going to come up here and write it to the radio. And here in a second, hopefully the radio will start. Setting area is fine. Found, continue warning, sure. Yeah, as soon as it starts, there's the clone. We should start seeing it go into clone mode. So we sit here and we wait for the radio to be updated. I'm not going to hold it up there the entire time. Once that finishes, we turn the radio off, we turn the radio on. And then we go back through those same initial setups. I don't have to put my call sign in it because actually I read the call sign when I originally read from the radio. Remember I said you always need to read from that radio? That's one of the things that we get out of it. But so as we write it back in here, that's still in there, but I do need to reset the DR mode on the radio. That will be reset.
How does this differ when you're using the RT system software?
The RT system software really does pretty much the exact same thing. They've set theirs up. One of the things I'll mention now is the D-Star calculator that's available at dstarinfo.com. That kind of helped you learn how to program the RPT1s, the RPT2 fields in the radios. And RT Systems implemented the same thing on theirs, and they've gone ahead and they followed through the same DR mode download capability. So we've now got the cloning succeeded. So when I go to the radio now, I've got to, I can unplug it at this point in time. I can turn it off, turn it back on. It comes up into the two-band mode with some FM repeater. First thing I'm going to do is just put it on the single VFO, so we can see the single VFO now. And I'm going to go into DR mode. I can do this without looking at the radio. It'll be in the two-line mode now. I'm in the from, so I'm going to hit the blue button in the middle. Comes back with repeater list, near repeater, or TX history. Now, because I have just turned the radio off and turned it back on, the radio doesn't have a current GPS. I'm going to come in here. Which repeaters do you want to get, all, or the DV, or the FMs? And I'm going to choose DV at this time. Does it see the GPS at this point in time? No, it didn't see GPS at this point in time. Remember the last place that it was at, which happened to be at home, which is really close to the repeater to me. I select the repeater. That bottom 9 is now filled out the right way. It'd be for 2. Now I'll go up to the top one. I'm on the 2 on the top where it says CQ, CQ, CQ. I'll select it. I'm going to go to reflector. Reflector. Yeah. Reflector. Use reflector. And actually, I'm going to switch repeaters right quick because that one is too far away from me right now. I'm going to go to the Lawrenceville repeater here to me. I just went to the nearest repeater and changed it. Let's see if this works. I think I just heard the repeater come back to me. Turned on, John? WA4YIH testing. So that's all it took. That's not necessarily that hard. So basically, radio from the dealer, from the manufacturer, it's got a database already into it. That database is a little old. That database has a few, very, very few FM repeaters, but you can still use it. So this repeater here happens to be in the database when it comes from the manufacturer. So a brand new radio would have found this one today. But I just updated the D-Star and the FM repeaters in here in this radio. Questions?
How often is the current database pulled by Icom for manufacturing?
I have yet to see any changes from the original one, so I don't think they're doing any updates to the current listing.
Then it's important to go to D-Star Info and get your latest repeater list.
Yeah, that is probably one of the reasons why they don't go and make the adjustments to it, because you can go custom your own download from D-Star Info.
So when you get your new radio and you take it out of the box and you charge it, the next thing to do is go to dstarinfo.com, download the current programming.
Even though you can, I just opened up the ID-51Plus2 last night, charged the battery on it, and for example, in the Atlanta area, you have out of the box with even a 3 or 4 year old database on it. You have W4DOC downtown Atlanta. You have WX4 GPB Stone Mountain. You have WD4STR here in Lawrenceville. So you've got major repeaters in most areas, even without updating it. But as they say, to get the most current list, do that every so often.
Any questions? Is that easy enough for you? It's generally a whole lot harder to explain than actually just do. You can get this done in just a few minutes.
Ed, one of the things you mentioned a minute ago about the SD card. So then you can either write these CSV files that you're downloading either directly to an SD card outside of your radio, or you can load it into your radio and then save it or export it to an SD card. One of the things I do when I was traveling a lot, my SD card has those same repeater lists, but centered on different cities. For example, if I went to Denver, before I leave, I'll download a file centered around Denver, and I'll just give it a name like DEN or something, and then a date code to show when I was doing it. So when I get off the airplane in Denver, I just go SD card, import, pick that file, let it load in the radio, again, power off and power back on, it reloads that list, and I've suddenly got the repeaters within 300 miles of Denver. And I'll just continue to make those lists. So when I go to a new city, I take about 5 or 10 minutes before I leave and make a CSV file, save it on the SD card. So when I go to that city, my radio is ready and current with the information for that local area.
Question, yes.
Jim Stevens, KJ4QVT. You made mention that it was important to save it in a particular area on the SD card.
Yes. It basically, the easiest thing to do is get a brand new SD card. Now, don't use a big SD card for this. It can support recording voice, and if you record voice for an entire year, you're probably not going to get over a gig on that. But for the repeater list, those are very, very small. They're well under a megabyte in size. Get your card, format it in the radio. At that point in time, it will put the directory structure down on the card for you. And what I generally do is go to the radio, and you can actually export what's in the radio. That will put that then on the SD card for you, so you have your current settings. You can export the CSV, the repeater list. You can also export the ICF, which is all the radio settings. Then get your new CSV and go find, I can never remember exactly where it is.
It's CSV. If you look under the directory structure, all your CSV files are in a folder called CSV. If you save the whole, because if you put it outside of that file, when you try to import it, the radio won't see it. But if it's in that CSV file, if you're saving the entire settings of the radio as an ICF file, save those. You can save multiple ones in there, and that saves not only the memories, but all of the settings in the radio, and that goes in the folder conspicuously marked settings.
Okay, thank you.
So that kind of worked for one radio, so I'm just going to see if I can make my odds against me. I'm going to try it now for the Kenwood. Now, for the Kenwood, you need this special black cable. That's just a micro USB connector on this one. I've got thousands of these things. There is no special cable. I really hope that Icom will do this next time they come out with a radio. But indeed, so some of the bigger radios, the HF radios do have the connectors on them, but you can do it. But the HTs are still on the round connectors. So the Kenwood uses the micro, which is so nice because I carry those around with me all the time. So I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to go to the radio. And you got to plug it into the radio. Onto the side of the radio, just plug it in, pretty much like the other one. We're going to turn the radio on now. I know I've got a radio coming on. John hasn't done this yet, but one feature of the radio that I've done to mine is as it turns on, you can actually customize the screen that turns on. John gets so upset because mine comes up with my pretty face. And so
Just because it's your birthday today, Ed, I don't want my radio coming up with your face. But let's all wish Ed happy birthday today.
Thank you.
And luckily, if you go to D-Star Info and download the programming, you don't get a picture of Ed's face loaded into your radio.
So this is the MCP D74 software. We're going to go through basically the exact same steps in this software that we did on Icom. So we're going to read it into the computer. Let's see if it starts reading. I might have to switch a port out here. Oh, no, I have to hit the read button. Yeah, that works. Thank you, Robin.
Programmed this one more recently than the 51.
Okay. And so the reading completed a whole lot faster than it did last time we did the example. But it's now in here. So we are looking here at the memory channels. You can indeed see that John has got some stuff in his memories. This is John's radio that I'm actually programming now. Now we go down here to the repeater list. So now we've got the repeater list. So far the instructions are pretty much exactly the same. We will come in here and import the repeater list from a file. Whoops, I've got to have a file first. So basically we come to the exact same page we were at before at dstarinfo.com. And we have to choose another radio this time. D74A. So notice there's no %FM on this one anymore because this radio does not do FM. But we still have the empty repeater slots. We're going to hit the download.
Well, it does FM, it doesn't store the FM repeaters.
It doesn't do the nearest repeater, correct, sorry. So we're going to do a save as again. This file starts with a K, which means it's the Kenwood, and it's got the radio model in it. And it saves it as the TSV, which is a tab separated value field. This file is also in Unicode. Yeah, saved the right spot. You notice the downloads are fast. These files are really, really small. We can import the repeater list from the file. All configures be overwritten. I'm going to go in here. No, I'm just updating his repeater list. I'm not messing with the rest of his memories, just the repeater list. Because he probably hasn't done this lately, have you?
Not in a while.
Not in a while. So we'll give him the latest list.
Oh, and by the way, W1FJM wishes you happy birthday
Well, thank you. Thank you, Fran.
from our D-Rats.
Do you have hotspots in yours? Don't remember. Let me take a look.
Does that go for DVAPs as well?
In the DVAP, sorry.
Okay.
I have to add that extra. I don't think you have the hotspots in here. So we will go back to the import again for the third or fourth time. We'll choose the Kenwood file. So it asks us for which one we want. We're indeed on a radio. So notice that for Kenwood, the no letter is the Japan radio. The E is the Europe, and the A is the K type with USA, Canada. This gets really, really confusing when you look at the details on which radios are in which areas across the world. But hey, we're the A land here, so we all have to remember that. So we've imported this in. On this file, you notice that we do try to keep all these funky letters right. So for those that are in different languages, we try to keep all the letters pretty close to what they're supposed to be. And so this has now been read in. When we come in here, we edit the area. This one is laid out a little different, a lot different from the Icom format, but the selection method that you use for repeater list ends up being a whole lot more intuitive here. And this changes dramatically from the default on the radio when you get it from the factory. From the factory, when you go to the US, I think you come to the next level. It says W0, W1, W2, W3, W4, W5, W6, W7, 8, 9, and 9. Everybody knows what a W3 is, right? That's the 3 area call signs. That's repeaters in 3 land. Now, I don't necessarily even remember where 3 land is myself. So once we do this, they'll actually come up in regions of states. We'll go ahead and hit the OK. We didn't do anything there. We just looked at it, and we're going to write it to the radio. Oh, and I also can adjust the date and time on the radios, which I always have to ask the question, if I write GPS in there, why do I have to adjust the date and time? So the radio is now in program mode. Writing is complete. Radio has come back to me. Quick. Well, that's pretty quick. So I'm going to switch the mode around. Okay. Let's do this again. Another write. Save the data. Yeah, I hit the wrong write. And that's it. It just ran again. It's not that hard. It's really easy. Now on this radio, I'm going to hit the mode button, which is the upper right-hand button, as we talked to. Oh yeah, there is the other right, isn't it? And so as I hit that, you notice at the very bottom, it now goes into the 2-line mode. So you have the top half and the bottom half. The top is in the 2-line mode. I press and hold the down button. And I can see my repeater list, my nearby repeaters. I can go to nearby repeater. Comes back with the nearby repeaters. Actually, on this radio, GPS is invalid, so it can't get me there. So I'm going to go back by hitting the left arrow. Go into the repeater list. On the repeater list, we see the countries or the regions listed here on the top. We're going to go to North America. And in North America, we see the different regions. Wish the radio had display on the back. In the Southeast, we go to Southeast, and we see the different states in here. We go to Georgia. And in Georgia, we now see all the cities. They're in here alphabetical. So I'm going to go down to Lawrenceville, Lawrenceville, STRB. Choose it. So we get STRB in the bottom, okay, which means I can now hear. But notice that top field says CQ, CQ, CQ. If everybody can leave here today remembering CQ, CQ, CQ isn't right, CQ, CQ, CQ is bad, that's great. Press and hold the top button for a second. It comes up into the selection mode again. And I'm going to go down to reflector. Use reflector. And it's in here now. W4YIH, WA4YIH.
The use reflector may sound a little strange, but basically what it's saying is I want my voice to be heard if we're connected to a reflector.
And generally what it's actually doing, if you looked at the call signs, the RPT1, RPT2, it puts the G on the RPT2. That's all it's doing is putting that G, which means that it's able to make it all the way through the repeater to the internet, to the rest of the world. So that's the program for the Kenwood. Not that hard, is it? So everybody should be able to update their radios. Just go to D-Star Info. You can download what you got. Questions? And everybody here is quiet today. All right. Let me go back to my slides here and see where we're at.
Luckily, this is recorded so they can go back through the step-by-step that you just gave for either radio.
Yes. So now I'm going to talk about the ID-51Plus. It looks like this radio. So the first difference that you'll notice, Let me go get mine. John, can you get mine over there?
You know, it might be helpful to go through the different models, kind of the progression.
Sure. Can you bring all the radios over so we show it? All the radios?
We've already got an anniversary.
I can go back before then. So the first, what I call modern generation radio, is the ID-31. ID-31 is a great little radio. There's probably one and only one disadvantage to this radio, and that is UHF only. But it is a great. Lots and lots of repeaters are UHF, especially on D-Star, so this is a really great radio. So this was the first one that came out that implemented modern DR mode and the really great function. And after the 31 came out, well, what do we have to do next? We have to make the dual band version. So we'll notice when we're the single band versus the dual band is a little bit longer. Had to make the display a little bit bigger. So the 51 is the dual band version of the original 51 series.
Here's a little factoid for you. The reason they came out with the ID-31 is in Japan, they do not have 2-meter repeaters. So for them, it's a waste to do a 2-meter D-Star radio. So we got a lot of requests. Well, if you made a dual band, I would buy it, even though the majority of the D-Star repeaters are UHF here in the States as well. So we came out with the 51 series, and all those guys that came by that said, I would buy one if it was a dual band, we're like, go give them your money.
And as a result of the 31, we came out with the 70 centimeter DVAP, which made that a viable radio in the U.S.
But D-Star's proprietary, man. How did you do that?
Yeah, we used all the proprietary parts.
So we basically, D-Star grew up a little bit to this radio, and then once we grew up, we changed colors. So this is the ID-51 Anniversary Edition. Why do they call it the Anniversary Edition, Ray?
Because when you turn it on, you'll see it is celebrating the 50th anniversary of Icom.
50 years. Been around for a while. So
And
let's
then
go back a little bit.
if you're a repeater geek, this is the radio that's the preferred. This is still my radio. If you're going in to program multiple repeaters, you're setting up new repeaters. We do that a lot in Georgia. This is the easiest to get in and actually program those fields that everybody hates, the repeater 1, repeater 2 fields, because you need to do that to test the repeaters.
No, sir, you do not.
If you're going to do
Program the frequency, chunk the repeater reprograms RPT1 and
Are you
RPT2.
familiar with the ability to go between repeater modules using repeater 1 and repeater 2?
Yes, sir, I am.
You need this radio to be able to do that.
So, and there were some generations like this was the 91. There was a 80 that was after the 91, I believe.
Well, the first ones were the V82 and U82, where you added the module. The 2200 that you could add the module. Then came out the 80, AD, and the 91, then the 92, then the ID-31, the ID-51. Oh, and the 880 came out the same time as the 80 AD. Then,
Easy for you to say.
yeah, it is.
And I know at Dayton a few years ago, we had a presentation where we listed all the radios when they came out. And I think at D-Star Info, I've got that page replicated for when all the radios came out, because we're starting to forget when they came out. And so the 51 is the colorful version of the 51 Anniversary Edition. This is the
Red one.
That's the red one, yep. So this is the, this is the anniversary edition of it. After the anniversary edition, there was another radio that comes in different set of colors again.
Yeah, that one actually was a commemorative unit that came out for the 2016 Tokyo Ham Fair.
Okay. And so it's got different set of colors. Feature-wise, it is the same radio, but packaging-wise, it's different. The anniversary edition came with a higher gain antenna and...
Yeah, it came with two antennas, a standard antenna and the higher gain antenna. It also added several features, the fast DV mode, the near-me repeater for analog, and the ability to work with the Android app.
And so, since the anniversary to the Plus, to the now Plus 2, looks like it kind of got psoriasis, or really cute camouflage, we've now got the new radios. Now, on some of these radios, especially the black model, there's one way that you can tell the difference. It's very easy to do that. It's called take the battery off and look at the display in the side, because the fronts of the radios look exactly the same. So you have to go look actually in the back to see what it is. And this one we can see, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see it here, shows that it's a Plus 2. So the Plus 2 has the new set of colors. Here's the blue version of it. See the camouflage kind of blue version of it. So the Plus 2. Plus 2, there's all the colors for it. Really adds two new features. Terminal mode, access point mode. I'll get to that in just a second. And, well, this is the second. So uses the new RSMS3W software, which is available both for Android and PCs. To use it, you have to create a new terminal. Remember, John earlier was talking about how to do the registration process, and you would basically go in and add a terminal with a space, and we don't use any other letters like at one time we did. Robin started kind of saying, yes, we do. Well, here's where we now do this. Back. It's back. Now, the two places that this would be used at is for the letters and for the registration for the terminals is this radio and the old ID ones.
And that's in the 8th character of your call field, my call field. Which one of those? Mine. Yes. Correct.
Yours,
you
mine,
win.
Mine, yours.
You win a radio.
Oh, thank you. So, how many people in here in the room today have an ID1? Yeah, I don't see any hands. Well, I know there's 3 or 4 of us that do. I got 2.
John's got 1.
So John's
I've got
one,
2 as
yes.
well.
And so with 1, we're okay. But with 2, we needed different terminals.
Actually, if you only have 1 and you're doing voice communications with a different radio, you still need the different letter.
Okay. So now with the new capabilities of the Plus 2, to use that, you've got to add a new terminal. And it's a terminal called access point. Now, if you remember on that screen that John showed, or when you signed up, the words access point did not appear on that screen at all. But if you go to a G3 gateway, they now appear. So, regrettably, the only way for you to start using this radio at this point in time, and it's going to, of course, change, is if you are registered on a gateway that supports G3. So if you're registered on a gateway that's only G2 right now, you're going to have to wait a little bit until that gateway is upgraded. So for the G3 folks, like John said, there's a couple dozen out now. One of the ones that is upgraded is the Atlanta HRO machine. So since it has a few thousand users on it, those folks can actually request the store to do the upgrade on it for them. You'll have to add a new terminal for that. So the new terminal is an access point terminal. There's, you can add a letter into it, but basically you can't change an existing one. You have to add a new one. So once you add a new one, you now have to wait for replication. Now, replication for all the stuff across all the world to all the places, what would be the replication times now, Robin?
You know, it's less than 5 minutes.
Okay. I've seen some of it a little bit longer, but basically you have to wait for the replication to occur. Once they occurred, then you can start using this. So the software basically hooks up to the radio with, this is one difference in the 51 Plus. I keep always forgetting. This radio comes with the programming cable. And it comes actually with the programming cable, the Icom cable. Now, it'll hook up to an Android software, but it doesn't support programming over the Android software. But the cable will hook up to the Android or to the PC. And over the PC, indeed, it supports programming. So,
Now, Ed, I know there was a question that had come in during the registrations for the D-Star live stream, and that was on the G3 gateways. I did check this morning. There's 54 gateways that are running G3. I know we've approved almost 200 gateway sysops to get the download from the K5TIT team. I know they're working on that at a pretty hard pace to get as many people to get their gateways upgraded, but some of them it does require somebody to be right there at the gateway to do the loading when you install the new CentOS.
And it's already updated to 56.
So 2 more today since we started. But one thing about it, if your gateway is not upgraded to G3, contact your sysops, put some pressure on them, get them to go ahead and do the upgrade, because it's more than just adding the access point in the terminal mode. It does increase the security capabilities of the gateway itself.
and we will be talking in depth in a little bit. Robin will be about the new gateway software. So I'm just going to look at the features from the user's perspective for that. Now, so basically what happens is you hook this radio up to computer using the cable, could be the Android or the PC. I haven't set it up on this machine. This is John's machine, not my machine. Basically, you connect in, you start up the Icom software, you put in your call sign, you put in the terminal mode, put some information into it, you connect it to the radio. There's terminal mode and access point mode. In terminal mode, what happens is you use this radio as a microphone and speaker. So it becomes your microphone and speaker. It has a cable connected to the computer. So you're only this far away from the computer. You can't get too far away from it, but you can use this radio to talk and to hear on. In access point mode, this radio hooks up to the computer, same way, same cable, same function. But in access point mode, this now acts as a RF terminal, kind of like a DVAP or a hotspot or one of these other guys. And you have to use another radio to talk to it. So basically now I can take the radio that's connected to the computer, leave it there, but I can roam away from it on the computer, on the radio that I'm using to talk on now.
So you have to buy 2 D-Star radios to do this. Buy Icom stock.
Yes, you have to buy 2 radios. Now, the radio that you're talking on does not have to be an Icom radio, but it has to be a D-Star radio. So it can do that, but it's basically the one that you have here. So yeah, you've got to dedicate a radio here, and there may be alternatives for this. Now, when you're using this feature supports call sign routing only at this time. I'm not sure if it's going to change anytime in the future, but at this point in time, it only supports call sign routing.
Let's make one clarification. It's not the radio, it's the software, whether it's the Android app or the Windows software, the RSMS3W, that provides the portal. The radio has the command structure to go through it, But you can't do it just the radio by itself. You have to have the software for the portal.
So, call sign routing. Talk to just a little bit about it, what call sign routing is. We've had a number of questions come in already on call sign routing. Call sign routing is a feature that's been available in D-Star since day one. Call sign routing is the capability to, in your radio, program your radio so that you talk into it, you talk to a repeater, and your signal comes out wherever the person that you want to talk to is. It could be on the other side of the world. So basically what happens when you set your radio up for call sign routing, you talk, the gateway takes a look at it, sees where this other person is that you've told them to connect to.
Or last keyed up.
Or last keyed up. And that's where the signal comes out at that point in time. So it's a pretty neat feature. Now, the other user, for him to talk back to you, he has to basically set his radio up to talk back to you. Now, there's this button on most of the radios called the RX-CS, receive to call sign. When you press and hold that one, if somebody has called you using call sign routing, the RX-CS button will set your radio up to talk back to him. Top. The top button of the rocker switch, that's the RX-CS button.
Now, one thing with that, if any of you have heard hams from Japan calling through the repeater, they're going to be call sign routing. Most of them do not have the capability of individual call sign routing. So they will make the announcement, if I was calling to Robin, AA4RC N9JA, call sign routing, Robin would then, one of the etiquette things is to disconnect the reflector that's attached to it, because if you've got a reflector connected to it, then everybody hears only Robin's side of the conversation. So that will make people wondering, is Robin just talking to himself again?
That happens all the time.
So let me go further with one comment on that. Japan does not support linking of repeaters. So their environment is kind of separated off from the rest of the world. And so we really can't link back and forth with them. That's a decision that Japanese JRL made. We kind of would all wish that they would change it, but they're kind of off by themselves.
That's one of those country rules and regulation things. But there are a few, as Robin was about to say, that a few renegades out there.
There's a couple.
There's also
sneaking
reflectors in Japan.
Yeah, there's reflectors, but a lot that's using some of the other devices to connect in. So the general one repeaters, they're all in a land by themselves. They can call sign route out to the United States. The databases between the locations have been synchronized so they can call sign out and you can call sign in. But like Ray said, if you're listening to a repeater and you hear Japanese station calling, everybody on the reflector is going to try to call back to him, and he is not going to hear a single one of you. Why is he not going to hear a single one of you? Because none of your radios are routing back to him. You have to push that RX-CS button, put his call sign basically, or his repeater's call sign in the to field to be able to route back to him at that point in time. At that point in time, he will start hearing you, but he does not hear anybody else on the reflector. And that's where this kind of becomes a little sticky point. The reflectors don't belong to Icom. Who started reflectors? Robin did. So Robin created the first reflectors on top of the Icom software. They sometimes work together really well, and in some places they don't necessarily work together really well. And this is one of the places that they're not necessarily the best neighbors to each other. So if your call sign routing to a repeater, and that repeater is linked to a reflector, you will come out on that reflector. So Japan Station might be connecting WD4 STR, But if WD4STR is connected to reflector 30 Charlie, it's not going to be heard around the world.
Can you show the reflector that on the screen here so we can also see it on the live stream to get an idea on how important it is to disconnect from the reflector because of how many RF assets are tied to the reflector at this time. The other thing to remember is when you're finished with that call to Hammond, Japan, is return your to field or your UR field back to CQ, CQ, CQ. And the reason why is if you don't, you will still be routing back to the Hammond, Japan, and they will only hear one side of the conversation. They will not hear who else is talking to.
So I'm showing the dashboard for reflector 30. When you look at the dashboard for reflector, you see all the modules on it. To get to the dashboard for reflector, it's REF, the reflector number, .dstargateway.org. It's easy to get to. If you forget how to get to it, you can go to dstarinfo.com, and the reflector list there has links to these also.
I love using this to show when people say D-Star's Icom, D-Star's proprietary. The top segment of this, and I love how Robin has set it up, the top segment are all the Icom hardware repeaters. But once you scroll down beyond that, the rest of it goes into non-Icom RF infrastructure support.
So back up on the B, we notice that these are generally Georgia repeaters because module B tends to be dedicated to Georgia. So we see 4 call signs in there. Module C is where lots of people go. So as I start coming down, I'm seeing 7s, 0s, 3s, still some 4s.
NO.
NO, W9, WL7, WX8. I'm surprised I'm only seeing US repeaters in there right now.
NO was there.
Oh, NO was there? Okay. So lots of different repeaters around. That's 30 repeaters, maybe 20 repeaters right now. Remote users, these are folks who are coming in with DVAPs or hotspots in here. You know, there's an MW, a ZL.
And when you don't disconnect the reflector and you're talking to somebody call sign routing, you're firing up every one of these RF devices transmitting out a one-way conversation.
So I saw some 2E0s. There's an IZ0.
Long list.
Yeah. And so that's the list of people on there. So indeed, there's a 2E0. Your signal is being heard around the world on these reflectors, some of these reflectors. Now, here's the last heard list just for this reflector. And I probably just refreshed it. You can see all of the different stations in here that are talking. I use ZS6 Johannesburg, South Africa, I guess. A 4X1, IK2s. I mean, they're all over the place of folks that are just on this list. How long does this list last?
I think it's 24 hours.
Okay. So that's what's been in here. So,
Ed, if I can go back to a previous question, go back down to the last heard. Someone asked the question about if their GPS or position information is showing up. See those that have an orange, the call signs in orange and bold? Click on one of those if you would. And it's going to bring up a map with that person's last DPRS position.
somebody's wife is probably out shopping in this case, and he's having to babysit her.
So when you have GPS enabled on that and you're squawking that, if you look on a repeater or reflector, and you can see their information if they're in orange and in bold font.
Question, yes, Kent?
On the bottom of your slide there, it says supports call sign routing only. I'm confused. What doesn't it support?
So call sign routing means that when I am talking on this radio, When I have this set, I have to put in a 2, and I have to put the call sign where I want to. That can be to a specific repeater, or it can be to a specific user. When I transmit on this radio, the only place that it comes out, is on the repeater that the user's at or that was specified.
So I can't connect to 30 Charlie or to another repeater?
Cannot connect to 30 Charlie, another repeater. You can't do that functionality.
Through the cable system the way it is now.
Using the terminal mode and access point mode features of the ID-51Plus2 as they exist today.
But that's going to change with third-party software, I hope.
As it exists today, it doesn't support it. We don't know what the capabilities and other options are. We have another question over here.
Norris, N9XGZ. I've got a friend back in where I used to live in Minnesota that's a ham. There is a D-Star repeater there. However, the person running it keeps it off the reflector. Would I still be able to do a call sign routing?
So is it internet connected?
It appears to be. The only thing I know is they come up when they do the weekly net. He ties in the Minnesota net. It's the only time he seems to tie this in.
Then yes.
Yes. Now, one of the things that you do have to realize for a linked repeater, a repeater can only be linked to one thing at a time. So if that repeater is already linked, you can't link to it. But if it is not linked, then you can take your repeater or your DVAP or your hotspot, and you can connect to it.
Or you can call sign route to it.
Or call sign route to it, yes.
Well, this does tie into one of the other questions that we saw on the list from the registered users, and that was, how do you permanently link a repeater to a reflector? And that repeater might be permanently linked to the Minnesota reflector.
When we try to go in, it keeps coming back busy.
Then it's probably linked to something else. Now, you can try to look at the dashboard for that repeater and see if the dashboard says that it is already linked.
Says it's unlinked. It looks like it. He's just not accepting it.
Yeah, they can block connections as well. There's a configuration file that says, don't allow remote connections into me, which is typically used during a net, so you don't have people coming in when you're running a net.
So unless he's cleared that, I can't do call routing.
No, you can do call sign routing to
You just
him
can't link into it.
if he's got it connected to the internet.
Yeah, call
All you
sign
got to
routing
do
will-
is put in your friend's call sign in the UR or the
Okay.
2, and it will route through it if he's keyed up on that repeater.
So it doesn't matter where I'm at or anything. It'll just make the call.
That is correct.
Okay.
Of course, the other option, if he can link that repeater to your repeater or link that repeater to the reflector that your repeater is linked, then you should be able to talk there as well.
Okay. Thank you.
But I
think
have
you'll
run
get a
into
busy indication if there's a conversation currently active on the system you tried to call sign route to.
no, you don't get a busy.
There
a
isn't
busy on
any notification back to the
No.
radio.
No, there's not. But there are a lot of different repeaters that are configured. Like you guys have got the ones configured permalinked, and if one of you guys could go into what is permalink, because that's not a software or an Icom operation, but the sysops will configure the repeater any way that they want to. But if they're running the Icom gateway software, and this is one of the beautiful things about how it was designed, there's no limitations on where you can talk to. So if they've kerchunked the repeater, you can call sign route to them. They hit that RX to CS button. They can then call sign route back to you.
So generally in the US and to a great degree outside Japan, we've not done a lot of call sign routing because some of the issues that comes out of it.
One of the benefits initially of call sign routing was you didn't have to know where the person was. Because if I go to Los Angeles, I get off the plane, I turn on my radio and I kerchunk on a local LA repeater, then that is, a database is updated to say you last transmitted on K6 blah, blah, blah. And so now if Ed or Robin is trying to reach me and they call sign route to WB4QDX, it knows that I was last heard on K6 blah, blah, blah repeater. So it will route that call there. Now I'll hear them, but then I've got to reverse route back to them. That was one of the advantages. One of the disadvantages of call sign routing is when I call sign route to you in some other distant site, I don't know whether there is a QSO going on that repeater right now or not. So I may barge in on an existing QSO because I'm not going to hear it. I'm not going to hear all those stations. So one of the things that's kind of a point of etiquette is if you call sign route to someone, then hopefully they will link the repeater and use repeater linking where that you hear both sides of the conversation on each end, if that's a possibility later, as a second step. So that's where call sign routing can be an advantage, but as Ed said, it hasn't been used as much since the feature was built into D+ for repeater linking. And then that way you hear both sides of the conversation on all the repeaters that are linked together.
So in the original version of the gateway software, the repeater software from Icom, what we kind of call V1, that's the only way you could do it when you want to talk off of your repeater. We had to use call sign routing back in the very beginning, and that's why we did that. In G2, when it first came out, that was the only thing that we had available in G2 also. Icom added a new mode called multicast mode, which sounded kind of good, but really didn't work too awful great. But not too long after that, then D+ came out. And so Robin gave us then the ability to link repeaters together. So one of the things that John and I kept looking at is, in version 1, it was really hard to hold a net across more than one repeater. You really couldn't do it because the most you could do is 2 repeaters, basically. And so in then G2, the multicast mode came in, and then we could kind of link 10 repeaters together. But the way they linked together, none of the repeaters had enough bandwidth to really support it, so we had some problems keeping up that conversation. But then when linking came in place, it started really well, and linking reflectors. So one of the big differences with the reflectors exist generally in big data centers. They have a lot of connectivity. We saw on the Reflector 30 how many things were connected in. That's a lot of bits that have to come back and forth. So some of these repeaters are generally on DSL type circuits and those type things, and they don't have a lot of bandwidth. And so it becomes very important that the reflectors only talk to one repeater at a time, and they keep that bandwidth really, really low at that point in time. Now, the reflector has a huge amount of bandwidth, but the individual repeaters, DVAPs, dongles, hotspots, they all have very small things. So it's been an evolution over time. This one kind of comes back a little. This radio works great in Japan. And hopefully sometime in the future, it's going to work really great everywhere else. But for today, it only supports call sign routing only.
And just to go a little bit more into that, it is interesting with as much as I travel, I try to keep in touch on D-Star, and there's some cities where the sysops or the clubs are very protective of their repeater. And there's one city, and I'm not going to say where it was, but it's a very funny story. I ID'd and asked if anybody was using the repeater, would anybody mind if I connected it up to Reflector 30 Charlie? There was nothing but dead silence. I then heard Robin's voice said that I was linked, and I heard all the chatter coming from 30 Charlie. All of a sudden, I heard that the link was disconnected. It was interesting. I ID'd again, asked if anybody was using the repeater. Still silence. Linked it back up to 30 Charlie. And about a minute or two later, it unlinked again. So I thought I would just be quiet and listen to what happened. Within 15 minutes, all of a sudden a couple of local guys started chattering on the repeater. And yeah, somebody was messing around with it and linking it to 30 Charlie. You know we don't like that reflector. There's just too much conversation going on. And then all of a sudden I came up on the repeater and it ID'd. It was me. I'm sorry. I did ask if anybody minded. If somebody would have said, yeah, please don't connect it to 30 Charlie, I wouldn't have done it. All of a sudden I hear back, two of the locals, all of a sudden one of them goes, N9JA, you can connect it to anybody you want to. Pete, you might need to go look up his call sign and then you'll understand. So they do, some clubs do get protective of their repeaters because of the funds that go into it. They don't want abuse of it. But at that point, what I did was I did call sign routing to KJ4VO and let him know that I was call sign routing just to keep the chatter just between he and I instead of the entire round table that goes on 30 Charlie at a normal pace.
And it's interesting, we, on the FM repeaters, we are typically complaining about how the activity has really dropped off. And now on D-Star repeaters, people are complaining about how there's too much activity.
So Ray, speaking of looking up your call sign, I think you need to go take a bathroom break right now. The Kenwood TH-D74. New radio introduced the end of about the fourth quarter last year, so it's only been around for a few months now. Also, the ID-51Plus2 is about the same age. They were introduced very, very close to each other. The TH-D74, Kenwood's latest radio. It's a multifunction radio. This is what I call a kitchen sink radio. It does all sorts of stuff. It does D-Stars. It does all the Kenwood, what Kenwood is famous for, the APRS, the FM. It's a tri-bander. It also does HF receive. Now, a lot of radios kind of do HF receive. This one is pretty interesting in that it has the ability to set specific filters on the receive. So if you only want a 2.5 kilohertz wide filter on your HF receive, pretty cool. There is a ferrite antenna built into the radio for doing the HF receive. You can also turn it off and connect it up to an antenna. When you connect it to an outside antenna, it supposedly gives pretty good capabilities. Now, there's really not any 220 D-Star repeaters out there today. This radio will do D-Star on 220. So,
I think there's an experimental 220, the new module that goes into one of the Bridgecom.
Yeah, the Bridgecom does it. There's a couple ways of converting repeaters over to D-Star. And Europe does a lot of this. And so indeed, you can use the Bridgecoms, but it would certainly be nice if I had a little device like a DVAP. Do we have any of those?
Yes. DVAP is now in 220 as well.
Oh, the DVAP is at 220 now. So you can use the DVAP with the Kenwood TH-D74. The color TFT display, you've kind of already probably seen that display. Really colorful, really bright. It also supports Bluetooth. So the Bluetooth can be used as a headset. It also can be used to control and communicate to the radio. And it's got a micro USB data port. Finally, I really love it when they do things like that. So this radio is a really nice radio. It supports D-Star very well. Now, it doesn't support everything the way I personally wanted in D-Star yet. There's been a number of updates to the radios to get a little bit closer. Will it get that close? I'm not sure. There are some things that it, like slow speed data, doesn't support slow speed data. As far as I know at this point in time, it only supports the high speed data, which in the Icom world, most of the times we're on the slow speed data because that's what we'll talk to all the other different radios out there. So little bitty things in here that have some things, and they've got some weird names and concepts in here that's a little different. But this is a great little radio. The D74, when you compare that against the Icom, it is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit thicker. It's definitely a little bit heavier. but it includes the kitchen sink. So this radio can do APRS. So it does regular APRS positioning just like other Kenwoods before it does. It can also do the D-Star equivalent. Not quite as flexible on that one. I think they're still kind of working on that part of a little bit. But it is a good D-Star radio. For years and years and years, all of us have had to answer the question, why is Icom the only manufacturer for D-Star? D-Star is a Icom only protocol. We now know that's not true. D-Star is supported by multiple manufacturers. 2 out of the big 3. Yaesu still has their system Fusion out. But now we get 2 of the 3 on one protocol, which is really, really nice for us now because Kenwood's got some promises that they've done. Hopefully they're going to come out with some new radios, maybe some infrastructure, a lot of things out here. So we got some capabilities coming out with the Kenwood radio.
2 things to mention, Ed, on the D74. They're, like most of the new radios, they're firmware upgradable. Kenwood did an excellent job out of the box, their first D-Star radio, implementing DR mode, nearest repeater, things like that, just like the current generation of Icom radios did. So those are features that we were all used to. There have been several firmware upgrades. I think we're on 1.05 now. So if what I see in that is there'll either be bug fixes or enhancements to it as it's going along. So it looks like they're going to support the radio very well.
Yeah, they've done a great job at adding new firmware fixes rapidly. Bugs get reported, and very shortly thereafter, there's a new firmware release.